Like so many of you, I share things online all the time. A few years ago, I shared an essay on Medium titled The Crossroads of Should and Must. Except something about this piece was different than anything else I had put on the internet before. Within 2 weeks, it was tweeted to over 5 million people and read by over 250,000 readers. I was baffled, and I wanted to understand what was it about this crossroads that had so gripped people. I decided to extend the essay into a book, which, to my delight, is now out in the world. But today, I want to go back. I want to go back to where it all began. It all started with a dream, a recurring dream about a white room. And in this dream, I would walk inside this room with tall white walls, warehouse windows, and a cement floor. And I would sit on the floor, and I would be filled with the most unbelievable sense of peace and calm. That was it. That was my dream. Simple enough, right? A friend one day asked the question that really turned my life inside out. She said, "Have you ever thought about looking for this dream in real life?" I hadn't, but I was intrigued. And so I began thinking, okay, if I'm going to go look for this dream in real life, where do I begin? Where do I even start? Craigslist. I had no idea what I was looking for or what I was going to find, but I had this feeling, and maybe you've had this sense about something in your own life, that whatever I was looking for was somehow looking for me too. I began searching day in, day out. I kept looking. And one day I saw it right there on Craigslist, a warehouse for rent here in San Francisco's Dogpatch District. And, of course, there was an open house the very next day. I go to the open house, I get the apartment, and 2 weeks later, I move into the white room from my dreams. I take my seat on the floor. I wait for that peace to arrive, but it doesn't. Instead, I'm filled with anxiety and a lot of questions, like, what am I doing? What is this all about? I decide to ask the room that had called me to it, why am I here? And as clear as day, the room replied, and the room said, it's time to paint. I had painted all the time as a little girl. I had painted even through college into my adult years, but somewhere along the way, I just got busy. I started doing other things. But after hearing this very profound omen, the next morning I got up and I went to the art supply store and I got the band back together again. And I came back to the white room and began the most wild and wondrous journey of creating my dream in real life. Welcome to my studio. This is the place where I like to say the only rule is that there are no rules. No case studies are allowed in here, no right answers, no nothing. I worked at scales that deliberately freaked me out. That is my coffee cup on the table for scale. And when big got easy, I quickly moved to small, and I started sharing all of this online on social media. I learned very quickly that if you're going to share a scary object, take your cute, fluffy, small white dog and place her right in front of the scary thing. And then one day something happened that I never could have anticipated. I got a call from a local gallery, asked if I wanted to have a show, which I said enthusiastic, you betcha. A moving truck came, all the paintings left, but the real important bit is this photo. This is after everything had left. This is really what it was all about. Aristotle calls a moment like this in our lives a tabula rasa, or a blank slate. It's a place where nothing has been written yet, and everything is possible. I needed this place in my life, a place where I could go and quiet all of the external voices, where I could really cultivate a restful mind and start to hear myself think. The only catch in all of this is that I had a full-time job. I was the design lead at a startup here in Silicon Valley called Mailbox, and our task was to revolutionize email for the iPhone. Maybe some of you even downloaded Mailbox and use it. And around this time, I started reading a biography about Picasso by Ariana Huffington. And in it, she talks about his life and his work. She says, and I quote, "The more I learned about his life and the more I delved into his art, the more the two converged." Because Picasso's work was so thoroughly autobiographical, what he did was what he was. You guys, I read that sentence again and again and again, and it led me to a question. What if who we are and what we do are one and the same? Well, what if it wasn't just about making art in my life, but what if it was also about turning all of life into a work of art? What might the implications of that be? It was February when we shared Mailbox with the world, and the launch was exciting and wildly successful, such a blast. In the back of my mind on that day, I kept thinking, wow, to be a part of a team that's doing this is one of the highlights of my life. But I couldn't reconcile what it had to do with my dream of a white room. That was when the crossroads appeared very clearly in my life. Two paths, equally appealing, but they were different, and I had to choose. I looked at my finances. I saw that I could buy myself a little bit of time to explore, to make more art in the white room, and I decided to put in my 2 weeks and leave and give it a go. What I've learned since this day is that we all arrive at this crossroads every time you make a decision. Sometimes they're really big, other times they're small. But every day you get to choose, should or must. Should is one way we can go. Should is all of the expectations and obligations that we feel other people put upon us. And when you choose should, you know it the minute you do. You know, your whole body constricts, you get small, you know this. Must is different. Must is who you are. It's what you believe. It's what you know to be true right here in your gut. Must is choiceless. It's unavoidable. It's undeniable. And if I have learned one thing in all of this work, it's this. Choosing must is the greatest thing that we can do with our lives. But if it's so great, why don't we choose it every day? That's a very good question. It turns out that from the moment we're born, it's a natural and healthy process to receive shoulds from our community, from our culture, from our family, our caretakers. And as we get older, it becomes important to start questioning the shoulds that we've inherited. But sometimes that process can get delayed. Sometimes it can get really delayed. And we might find ourselves as adults still living in a world of choices that we've unwittingly agreed to. I was talking to a friend of mine one day, and he asked me if I was familiar with a man named Gurdjieff. Gurdjieff was a spiritual teacher around the turn of the century. And one day he posed a question to his students. He said, if a prisoner wants to be free from prison, what's the first thing that the prisoner needs to know? One student raises their hand and says, the prisoner needs to get to know the guard. Another student raises their hand and says, the prisoner needs to find the key. No, Gurdjieff says, if a prisoner wants to be free from prison, the first thing the prisoner needs to know is that they are in prison. Until they know that, no escape is possible. If you want to get to know must, get to know should. Should is the doorkeeper that keeps us from even our very best ideas of what we want for our life. And since this is, just a few small friends, I'll share some of my shoulds with you. Some of my shoulds that I've had to really look at is something like you should never age. Advertising tells me I'm supposed to be maybe 18 forever. You should always be kind of quiet. You shouldn't be too controversial. Don't be too activist. One of the ones I've really had to deal with was my belief that I shouldn't say I'm a feminist, that there was something potentially bad about that. As you continue to get to know your shoulds, you can start asking them these 3 questions. First, where did you come from? Were you an advertisement, something I overheard when I was little? Second, are you true for me? for who I've become in my life and for where I am now? And finally, do I want to keep holding on to you? The idea that being a feminist was a bad thing was something I was really glad I got to look at, because being a feminist just means you believe in equality, and that sounds awesome. As you continue to bring awareness to your shoulds, they'll begin to loosen their grip on your life, and they will begin to work for you as you continue to move towards must. I want to share 3 questions that have come up as a result of doing this work, and these are probably things that you're thinking about right now. The first, what if I don't know what my must is? The very fact that you must have a must can seem overwhelming, yes? If this is you, have no fear. I have an activity for you to do. Call your mom. Call her or someone who knew you when you were little and ask them to tell you stories about what you were like. Nowhere is the essence of must more purely exhibited than when we're kids. What did you love to do? Who were you as a kid? Next, it turns out that choosing must raises a lot of questions around practicality. Just a few of them are these, but the one I get asked most often is this one. What if doing what I love doesn't pay? The artist and designer Stefan Sagmeister gave a TED Talk, and in it, he outlined 3 different modes of work. A job, he says, is something typically done from 9 to 5, something that we typically do for pay. A career is a system of advancements over time, and a calling is something that we do for intrinsic value, something that we do regardless of pay. Now, you might find that you have a calling on nights and weekends and a job Monday through Friday. Or you might find that your job and your calling are the same thing and you make a living from it. What I think is important to note here is that just because you want to find your calling does not mean that you need to quit your job. And just because you do something for work doesn't make that work dirty. There is dignity in all work, and we all have to sing for our supper on this planet. As I looked throughout time, I began seeing that there were different people who combine these things in different ways. One of my favorites is Philip Glass, the composer. He says, "While working, I suddenly heard a noise and looked up to find Robert Hughes, the art critic of Time magazine, staring at me in disbelief. 'But you're Philip Glass. What are you doing here?' I explained it was obvious that I was installing his dishwasher, and I told him I would soon be finished. 'But you're an artist,' he protested. I explained that I was an artist, but that I was sometimes a plumber as well, and he should go away and let me finish. The last thing that comes up again and again is this. This is so important, particularly in our busy lives. But I don't have space for must. For me, my space is my white room. It's where I go to quiet the voices and to drop inside of myself. Where is your space? Do you have a physical space that you can go to? The second type of space is psychological space. Must loves solitude. Must loves quiet. Is there a block on your calendar for you to sit with your must, for must to stand a chance to talk to you? I highly encourage you to find space and block it off and protect it like your life depends on it. One of the reasons I suspect we don't choose must is because we can get really busy, and it can become very addicting to being busy. But I guarantee you that if you start to slow down, if you create space for must, it's going to take root in your life. And it's going to begin to grow. Mark Twain once said that the 2 most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day that you find out why. And I believe that each one of us will find the answer to that second day right here at this crossroads. If you want to choose must, you can. And you can do it today. And here's how. Just do one thing. It might even take 5 minutes. Hopefully it takes 5 minutes. Just do one thing. Take one step towards that which you must do. I want to conclude with a brief story about a piano. I took myself on a date, something I highly recommend doing often. And I took myself to the San Francisco Symphony to hear Andreas Schiff play Bach's French suites. And I sat down in the 3rd row, and I noticed that the gentleman next to me had also come alone. Throughout the performance, which was marvelous, he was having an incredible time, and it was incredible to sit next to him. At the end of the performance, I leaned over and I asked him, "So, What did you think? He looked at me and he said, wow, to sit right here in the third row, to be so close that I can feel the vibration of the piano inside of my chest. This is to experience something with soul in it. Wow, I said, you must be a pianist. Who, me? He said, no, I can't play a tune. But you know, I have this recurring dream where I can. Thank you.